junk food driving diabetes, heart disease, and depression. They found a significant increase of all-cause mortality. Well, what's the action? What action are we going to take? A recent study has just come out from the Auckland University saying that ultra-processed food is linked to common diseases such as the risk of heart disease and cancer. I thought this was common knowledge. I mean, these studies have been around for decades, and I'm going to share some with you that have gone back showing this exact same thing over quite some period of time. But firstly, I'll just share with you this study that's come out just this month. Hi, I'm Brett the Herbalist, and welcome back to another episode of Secrets of Herbal Healing. If you want to follow along, there's a QR code just in the top corner there. So just scan that and it'll jump you through to the page with all the information. All right, let's get into it. All right, so this study's just come out from the University of Auckland. Junk food driving diabetes, heart disease, and depression. And we also know that this is linked with cancer, which I'll talk a bit about later on. So, ultra-processed foods now comprise around half of New Zealanders' diets. Well, that might be the case, but when you go into the supermarkets, it's 75 to 80% of the products in the supermarket are called ultra-processed food. So this processed food is basically food that's been denatured or killed in the processing of it. So, in other words, it has to become sterile through that process so that it can stay on the shelves for months and if not years without any kind of decomposition whatsoever. And decomposition is what happens in the digestive process, which means this food is basically indigestible. So it goes into the body and it sits there and it struggles to be digested. The other option that processed food has is that it's basically pre-digested, which means it races straight into the bloodstream like pure sugar. In other words, it's already broken down to such a degree that it just overloads the body with calories and fats. So it's no wonder. But I'll talk about this a little bit further. Professor Boyd Swinburne has done this study. Junk food is displacing healthy food. Urgent action needed. Well, what's the action? What action are we going to take? Because the government's failed to date to do anything about stopping people from eating processed food. And in fact, you can't really stop people from eating processed food unless you shut down the factories. So this is just a quick snippet of, obviously there's a greater study behind the scenes. But what I want to share with you is a couple of studies that I've seen that have been around for a long, long time. So here's one that's in the JAMA. It's an International Journal of Medicine. The association between ultra-processed food consumption and risk of mortality among middle-aged adults in France. In this study, they studied 44,000 French adults. They found a significant increase of all-cause mortality. In other words, death from all causes, in other words, all the causes of death have increased by 14%. We won't go into this a lot of detail because it's quite difficult to explain these numbers and these statistics. But overall, a 14% increase of all-cause mortality. In other words, an increase in ultra-processed food consumption may be associated with an overall high mortality risk. But I've done a little infographic on that one. So here's a simplified look at that study as an infographic, just to make it easier. So this is the JAMA study. Processed food groups include sugary drinks and snacks, so anything with a lot of sugar. Ready-to-eat processed meals, so these will have a lot of processed carbs and a lot of processed fats in them as well. And then processed meats and savoury snacks. But as I said, you'll find that 80% of the products in the average supermarket are ultra-processed food. And there's a direct link to cardiovascular disease, 12% increase in cardiovascular disease. So that's the risks of high blood pressure and heart attacks, strokes, and that sort of thing. All-cause mortality, so that's all causes of death, a 14% increase. And cancer, an 11% increase. So the links to these things can be traced back to the metabolism, the liver function, the hormonal control of the body, and the immune system. And here's a more recent study. This is from the BMJ, the British Medical Journal. The association of ultra-processed food consumption with all-cause specific mortality. So this is not specifically related to cancer and heart disease, as the previous study. They studied 74,000 women and 39,000 men with no history of cancer or cardiovascular disease or diabetes, but they did find a 9% higher mortality rate from causes other than specific cancer and heart disease. So still nearly a 10% increase in all-cause mortality. And here's a little infographic on that one. Again, sugar, sweetened beverages, processed meats, processed snacks. Cereals are a big one. But also bread can fall into this category of a highly processed snack food. Sweets and desserts. Obviously, these are often sweetened and flavoured. All-cause mortality. So there's the big one from that study. An increase in all-cause mortality. And as we said, that's up to 10%. And the factors in the middle here is what goes on in the biological systems in your body is you get the high blood sugars, high blood fats, you get immune dysregulation, you get stress and inflammation on the cardiovascular system and digestive imbalances. And you can often end up with, because of all these processed foods, insufficient digestion or autoimmune diseases in the gut. So the combination of things is what leads to these. There's also an increase in cardiovascular disease and cancer. They haven't got a direct link in that study, but in the previous study you could see that. And here's just another one I thought worth sharing as well, because you've got to include, these foods are toxic to the body, but we've also got to include other toxins in this picture. So heavy metals, lead, mercury and cadmium, the big ones. Organic solvents. So this includes sprays and pesticides and also chemicals that you use around the home. And then we've got plastics. And with other things like fragrances, there's a multitude. And I'll share a link to our toxin checklist in this below this video so you can have a look. But they accumulate in the tissues and inside the cells and disrupt the hormonal system and the immune system. And so you end up with all these other problems. Neurological development issues. We know there's a link there. Hormonal and reproductive problems, immune system and chronic diseases. So just I thought I'd share that one as well, because this all adds to the picture of toxicity in the human body. And just the last little graphic I wanted to share today, this one is showing the environmental pollutions. Again, it's not showing the foods, but we just talked about the foods. So you include all those things. What you need to do is a clean diet, which means fresh fruits and vegetables, and preferably organic if you can get them, or homegrown, to avoid the pesticides and sprays. But then also using these detox herbs. So things like milk thistle and dandelion, turmeric, ginger, herbs that purge the bowels, psyllium husk, cascara, and all of these herbs in a big combination. That's what we do with detoxing. So I'll share a link to the detox programs, the detox recipes, the detox herbs, and you can have a look at all of those things. But what that does is basically clears the toxins out of the body, helps the metabolism to reset, especially liver, kidney function and digestive functions. And that helps the whole body get clear and balanced and regulate itself again. The immune system starts to work properly, and a lot of these conditions are alleviated. So doing a regular detox once every 6 months or 12 months at least to clear the gut, clear the liver, get the immune system, and get clarity and peace back to your body. So just going back to this, it's no surprise these studies will keep coming out as long as we have a processed food industry, which I can't see going anywhere soon. And the causes of death will continue to escalate because these foods are continually stacking up on the shelves in our supermarkets. The only way around it is to either don't shop there, go to a produce store only, and only go into the supermarket for your toilet rolls, maybe your rice and a couple of canned foods. But other than that, I would avoid the supermarket food entirely if possible and go for whole foods, unprocessed food, and you'll take massive steps towards improving your health. But remember the detox program, because we're not perfect and none of us have a perfect diet over the period of a year. It's really good to do a detox program once a year. So I hope you saw some information there that really gave you some insights into what's going on with our health as a population, as a society, and as a Western culture. In fact, it's the processed food industry and the food chain that's behind the most common causes of death. And you add to that the toxins in the environment that we are exposed to as well, and you've got a real nasty cocktail, a vicious spiral that continues on through life, and things gradually build up. So a detox is really the only way to deal with it. And to do a detox every 6 months is recommended, every 12 months at least, to keep your system on track. It's a bit like servicing your car, really, no different. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.